Tonight we step quietly into the world of falconry, where hawks wear little leather hats, where your mornings smell of meat that would make a butcher blush, and where your nights are shorter than you'd like. Imagine yourself trudging across the muddy yard of a medieval manor, eyes still half shut, only to be greeted by the sharp, musky tang of bird droppings and the hiss of restless wings in the mews. You probably won't survive this life, to be honest. It's grueling, messy, and more than a little dangerous. Still, there's a certain strange beauty in it, and by the time we're done, you might even start to envy the falconer's rhythm. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Now, dim the lights, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You begin as an apprentice, not a grand falconer draped in fine leather, but a lowly servant in a stone manor whose mews are louder than the church bells. The mews, it sounds elegant, doesn't it, is really just a big drafty shed filled with perches, jesses dangling, and the sharp eyes of hawks watching your every clumsy move. The birds blink slowly, as though unimpressed by your arrival, and you quickly learn that here, you are no more important than the bucket you carry. Your tasks at first: glorified janitorial duty. Scrape the droppings, polite falconers call it mutes, from the floor, spread fresh sand or straw, and refill water basins. You wonder if anyone in history ever looked dignified while scrubbing hawk poop. The smell clings to your tunic, and no amount of hand-washing seems to fix it. Congratulations, you've joined a profession that ensures nobody wants to sit next to you at dinner. But in this mess, you start to notice small wonders. A goshawk preens her feathers with perfect precision, each barb fitted into place like a craftsman restoring a harp. A peregrine, sleek, impatient, snaps her beak in your direction, reminding you she'd rather be soaring than locked indoors. Their eyes are the strangest part. Unlike chickens or ducks, hawks meet your gaze with a steady, unnerving intelligence. You feel as though they are measuring your soul and finding you wanting. Your master, the falconer in charge, treats you with a mix of gruff commands and cryptic wisdom. He explains why the mews must be darkened to keep the birds calm, why their perches must be smooth as polished wood lest their feet develop sores. You don't quite understand yet, but you nod furiously, hoping he mistakes your confusion for eagerness. A historical fact for you: falconry in medieval Europe wasn't just a pastime, it was a status symbol. Kings, queens, and nobles collected hawks like modern influencers collect expensive cars. There was even a social hierarchy of birds: emperors flew eagles, dukes preferred gerfalcons, priests got sparrowhawks. If you were a peasant, forget it, you weren't even supposed to own a hawk. And yet here you are, ankle deep in bird droppings, a servant touching creatures meant only for nobility. Of course, apprenticeships are designed to test patience. You dream of holding a hawk on your glove, but for now, you're fetching rabbit carcasses, trimming strips of raw beef, and learning how to cut the meat into neat slivers. Too big, and the bird chokes. Too small, and she won't bother. You practice with scraps, half convinced you'll never quite get it right. By nightfall, your hands smell so strongly of liver that the manor dogs follow you around like you're a walking butcher shop. There's also the quiet rituals. You watch your master weigh a hawk on tiny brass scales, muttering numbers to himself. A hawk too heavy grows lazy, too light, and she risks illness. Historians still argue whether medieval falconers kept written records of these weights or relied on memory, but either way, you marvel at how a bird's entire training depends on ounces of flesh. And then there are the fringe details, the ones nobody talks about in polite company. Some falconers, it's whispered, would taste the raw meat themselves to judge its quality before offering it to the bird. Whether that's a true practice or just a joke to scare apprentices like you, well, you hope it's the latter. Still, the next time you slice liver, you can't help sniffing it a little too thoughtfully. Day after day, you drag yourself out of bed before sunrise. The hawks stir as soon as you enter, talons scraping the wooden blocks, feathers rustling like parchment in the wind. You clean, feed, and observe. Slowly, without noticing it, you begin to understand their rhythms. The angry snap of a peregrine's beak, the sulky slump of a hawk with too little exercise, the calm when a bird trusts the glove. You haven't earned the glove yet, but the dream keeps you steady. The manner itself doesn't make your life easier. Lords and ladies expect falconry to look glamorous. They want their guests to see sleek birds and gleaming hoods, not the half-asleep apprentice with straw in his hair. You learn to hide your exhaustion, to walk carefully as though every step matters. And in truth, it does, because if you stumble and startle a hawk, you risk a slash across the face from talons sharper than any knife. One evening, after another long day of chores, your master finally lets you stand quietly while he works a hawk. He whistles softly, the bird shifting from perch to glove, her wings brushing the air. For a moment, you forget your aching back, the smell of droppings, the sting of cold stone floors. You see what all the fuss is about. It's not just about hunting, it's about this strange partnership between human and raptor, a dialogue without words. And as you shuffle back to your pallet that night, straw poking through the thin blanket, you think, maybe scrubbing floors and smelling like liver is worth it if one day, you can hold that leather glove yourself. You're finally allowed to stand closer. No more lurking in corners, no more sneaking glances like a child forbidden from touching sweets. The birds are still not yours, but you're given the honor of proximity. And in the world of falconry, proximity is everything. The first time your master lets you approach the row of tethered hawks, your steps are stiff, your hands clumsy. Each bird is bound to its perch by jesses, thin leather straps fastened to their legs, tied carefully so they don't trip or tangle. The leather looks simple, but you quickly learn it's the line between order and chaos. Without it, the mews would erupt in a storm of wings and talons, and you'd be lucky to escape with both eyes. Your master gestures toward a peregrine falcon, feathers sleek, eyes sharper than any sword. She turns her head toward you in sharp, decisive clicks, the way a noblewoman might dismiss a servant. That stare pins you in place. You're holding your breath, as though the bird can smell fear the way dogs smell bacon. Your master chuckles softly. She's measuring you. She measures everyone. The ritual begins. You extend your arm, clumsy beneath the padded glove, and the hawk shifts her weight, claws clinking against leather. The sensation is electric, every ounce of her compact, lethal body pressing into your hand. She's not heavy, but she radiates tension, a coil of feathers and muscle always half an instant from explosion. You practice the tethering over and over, holding the bird steady, tying knots just right, checking that nothing cuts her legs. Too tight, and you harm her. Too loose, and you risk a bloody disaster. And believe me, you do not want to explain to a nobleman why his prized falcon suddenly looks like it wrestled a hedgehog. A mainstream historical fact sneaks in here. Falconry was not just about hunting, it was also a form of diplomacy. In the 12th century, King Frederick II of the Holy Roman Empire wrote an entire treatise on birds of prey, and gerfalcons were given as royal gifts across Europe and the Middle East. So when you're fumbling with those leather straps, remember, these aren't just birds, they're political pawns with wings. But then there's the quirky bit. Falconers sometimes spoke to their hawks like babies, whispering nonsense words to calm them. Your master demonstrates, crooning softly while stroking the peregrine's breast feathers. It sounds ridiculous, like a bard rehearsing lullabies after too much ale, but somehow, the hawk settles. You try it yourself, whispering half a nursery rhyme, and swear the bird glares at you like you've just recited bad poetry. Still, she doesn't bolt. That's a small victory. Of course, not everyone agrees on the best method. Historians still argue whether medieval falconers believed in strict silence around hawks or constant gentle chatter. Some manuscripts suggest absolute quiet was required, while others praise the calming effect of human voices. You, standing there sweating under the bird's gaze, aren't sure which side is right. All you know is your master talks, and so you do too, quietly, nervously, like a student bluffing their way through a sermon. Day by day, you become more confident. You learn the subtle signs, the fluffing of neck feathers that means irritation, the slow half-blink that signals trust. You notice how each species perches differently. The goshawk crouches low, predatory, as though the perch itself is prey. The kestrel bobs her head, light and restless. The peregrine stands tall, like a knight waiting for the joust. Each bird is a personality wrapped in feathers, and your job is to read the mood before it explodes into violence. It's not without accidents. One morning, you misjudge the knot, and the hawk lunges. The tether catches, sparing your face, but her talon rakes across your sleeve, shredding wool like parchment. Your master smirks, better the sleeve than your cheek. You laugh weakly, pretending bravery, while secretly imagining explaining to villagers that yes, you lost half your nose to a bird smaller than a goose. The glove becomes your world. Heavy, padded, always smelling faintly of oil and feathers, it transforms your hand into a perch. You carry it constantly, even when it's empty, because a falconer without a glove is like a knight without armor. And the first time a hawk settles calmly on your arm without fuss, that's the moment you realize this isn't just service work, it's a kind of trust. By evening, your master orders you to sit quietly with the tethered birds. No chores, no cleaning, just observation. You watch the tiny tremors of feathers, the quick movements of eyes. The hawks are never still, even at rest. Their wings twitch, their claws flex, their heads swivel like weather vanes catching invisible winds. You realize that falconry isn't about controlling these creatures, it's about standing beside raw, untamed energy and hoping it lets you close. As the torches gutter in the mews and shadows stretch long across the straw, you let out a slow breath. The birds do not belong to you. They may never belong to you. But for now, you are tolerated. And in falconry, tolerance is the first step toward partnership. The long watch begins. You've scrubbed the floors, tied the jesses, carried the buckets of meat, and now your master hands you a restless young hawk. She's wild-caught, still untamed, feathers bristling with suspicion. Her head darts side to side, eyes flashing gold in the torchlight. She's a bundle of nerves, all beak and talon, and your job is to keep her calm by, not sleeping. Yes, you heard that right. 4 nights on end, you sit with the hawk on your gloved fist, pacing the mews or sitting in silence, speaking softly, never letting her feel alone. The goal is simple. She learns that your presence is constant, reliable, safe. The reality? You learn how heavy eyelids can become after 20 hours of wakefulness. Your master calls this process watching, though it feels more like slow-motion torture. You're supposed to whisper, hum, or murmur, anything to keep the bird aware of you. So you mutter nursery rhymes, scraps of prayer, even half-remembered tavern songs, your voice cracking with exhaustion. At one point, you ramble so much nonsense that you realize you've been reciting your grandmother's dumpling recipe. The hawk blinks at you, unimpressed, as though she's wondering if she'll ever taste dumplings herself. The first night is the worst. The hawk fights the jesses, wings thrashing, feathers flying. Your arm aches, but you dare not flinch. Any sharp movement could undo hours of work. Your master passes by occasionally, checking your grip, grunting approval or shaking his head. Patience, he mutters, patience is meat for the soul. Easy for him to say, he's going back to bed. Historically speaking, this stage was crucial. Hawks weren't domesticated like dogs or horses. Every bird was wild, taken from nests or trapped during migration. Falconers had to man the bird, teach it to tolerate humans without breaking its spirit. Miss this delicate balance, and the hawk either remained a savage or grew too tame to hunt. No pressure. And here's a quirky tidbit. Some accounts claim falconers used to carry the bird on a swing or rocking chair during the long watch, gently lulling it into calmness. Imagine you, red-eyed and swaying, rocking a furious hawk like it's a colicky baby. If the neighbors could see you, they'd assume you've lost your mind. Of course, not all scholars agree on the method. Historians still argue whether the watching was truly necessary for days on end, or whether some falconers exaggerated the ritual to seem more mystical. Maybe some birds settled in a single night, maybe others needed a week. But here you are, stuck in the version that definitely involves sleep deprivation. By the second night, your body aches. The hawk no longer flaps quite so violently, but her suspicion hasn't faded. She stares, unblinking, while you fight to keep your eyes open. You pinch yourself, hum tunelessly, even nibble on stale bread to stay awake. And yet, every time your head dips, her wings twitch, reminding you that she notices everything. There's a strange intimacy in it, though. You learn her patterns, the tiny ruffle of feathers when she's content, the sudden tightening of claws when she's uneasy. You begin to feel her moods as if they're your own. When she grows still, you breathe easier. When she shifts restlessly, your stomach knots. She is teaching you, though she doesn't mean to. Sometimes, you drift into daydreams. You imagine what she sees when she looks at you, some pale, haggard creature muttering gibberish, smelling of sweat and liver. Hardly majestic. Yet, to her, you're becoming part of the landscape, as permanent as the perch or the leather straps. That's the point, after all. She must learn that you're not danger, not prey, not rival, just presence. A joke slips into your tired mind. You wonder if, centuries from now, someone will invent coffee just for falconers, a miracle drink to keep eyes open during these long vigils. Until then, it's you and the hawk, two creatures locked in a staring contest that lasts for days. By the third night, exhaustion becomes a rhythm. The hawk no longer thrashes, she dozes lightly, eyes half shut, talons flexing now and then. You sway on your stool, murmuring half-formed words. Your master finally nods approval. She knows you, he says. Not friend, not foe. That's enough. You feel strangely proud, though your back is crooked, your throat raw from whispering, and your brain convinced you've become part hawk yourself. You've survived the long watch. And more importantly, so has she, calmer now, tethered but not broken, her trust a fragile thread you'll spend months weaving stronger. When dawn light seeps through the shutters, you let out a sigh. The hawk blinks slowly, a half-blink that falconers swear means acceptance. And for the first time, you believe it. The training shifts. You've survived the sleepless blur of the long watch, and now the real dance begins, food and trust. Your hawk, that restless bundle of feathers, no longer thrashes at your every movement. Instead, she eyes you with cautious calculation. And in this new phase, meat becomes your language. It starts with tiny offerings. You slice up rabbit into strips so thin they're nearly translucent, holding one gingerly between two fingers. Your hand trembles beneath the padded glove as you extend it. At first, the hawk jerks her head back, suspicious. Her beak clacks, her wings twitch, and you hold perfectly still. Seconds pass like hours. Finally, with a swift jab, she snatches the strip and swallows it whole. You almost shout with triumph, but you swallow the cheer. The last thing you want is to frighten her into thinking dinner comes with screaming. You repeat the process, again and again. Meat is the bridge. Too much, and she grows lazy, preferring the comfort of your glove to the thrill of flight. Too little, and she sees you as unreliable, a scrawny butcher unworthy of her attention. Balance is everything. Your master explains this like he's discussing fine wine. Every bird has a weight, he says. Find it, and she'll fly true. Miss it, and she'll sit sulking like a maiden denied a dance. You nod, pretending you understand. Really, you just know your tunic constantly smells of raw liver. The manor dogs still trail after you, hopeful, like you're a walking buffet. Here's a solid historical fact. Falconers in the Middle Ages obsessed over feeding regimens. Some kept small brass scales to weigh their hawks daily, measuring to the ounce. Training was less about whipping or force and more about appetite control, hawk hunger as a leash. Your master weighs your bird each morning, muttering numbers like a priest counting sins. And then, the odd details creep in. A fellow apprentice whispers that some falconers salted meat to make hawks thirstier, forcing them to drink more and thus shed weight. Others supposedly fed saffron to make feathers gleam, or even sprinkled crumbs of bread soaked in wine as tonics. You imagine explaining to the hawk that she's on a medieval spa diet, saffron for shine, wine for wellness, liver for the main course. She'd probably still glare at you. Historians still argue whether these so-called diets did much at all, or whether falconers just wanted to sound clever in their treatises. What's undeniable, though, is that you spend most of your day smelling like an undercooked stew. You also discover manners are part of the training. Hawks aren't pets, they don't wag tails or roll over on command. But they can learn restraint. Your master demonstrates by holding out a strip of meat and refusing to release it until the hawk takes it gently. You try the same, flinching when her beak nips too close. Once, she pinches your finger just enough to draw a bead of blood. You hiss through your teeth, but your master laughs. Better the finger than the face. Again with the cheerful reminders. The feeding sessions become your lessons in patience. You talk softly while offering morsels, trying to link your voice with food, your presence with satisfaction. It's a strange courtship. You woo a hawk not with flowers, but with liver. And if she trusts you, she leans in smoothly, taking from your hand without hesitation. That first moment feels like a miracle. Of course, there are setbacks. One afternoon, you drop a strip too early. The hawk lunges, meat falls, and suddenly she's scrabbling on the floor like a drunk goose. You try to retrieve it, but she beats you to it, glaring as though you've betrayed her. Your master sighs, muttering something about apprentices ruining birds faster than foxes ruin henhouses. You sulk the rest of the evening, replaying the mistake in your mind. Still, progress shows in subtle ways. The hawk no longer thrashes when you approach. She leans forward at the sight of the meat pouch, eyes keen but no longer fearful. And the greatest reward? That small, almost imperceptible pause before she takes from your hand, as if acknowledging you. Not friendship, not yet, but the beginnings of manners. Late at night, lying on your straw pallet, you think of how strange this life has become. Your hands are always greasy, your nails rimmed with blood, and you haven't smelled of anything but liver in weeks. And yet, when you close your eyes, you picture the hawk's sharp gaze softening, the way her wings fold as she settles to eat. You feel oddly proud, even if you suspect the manor servants whisper that you're turning into a hawk yourself. A small joke flits across your mind as you drift off. If medieval falconers had dating profiles, they'd probably read, "Smells perpetually of liver. Good with knots. Excellent at staring contests. Romantic, in its own way." And so the days stretch on. Meat, patience, whispers, trust. You're building a bond, one slice at a time. Your master finally lets you see the grand spectacle that makes all the drudgery worthwhile. After weeks of scrubbing mews, whispering lullabies to hawks, and smelling like the manor's compost heap, you're told to prepare for a display at the Lord's courtyard. You're not quite sure what to expect, maybe a small gathering of huntsmen and their birds. Instead, you step into a scene that feels half circus, half fashion parade. The courtyard is alive. Lords and ladies lounge on carved benches draped with furs, their jeweled fingers stroking hoods more expensive than your entire wardrobe. Courtiers gossip in clusters, their voices lilting, while servants hurry with trays of spiced wine. You clutch your master's gear, trying not to drop anything, though your knees wobble with nerves. All eyes are not on you. Thankfully, they're on the birds. And oh, what birds they are! Hawks and falcons with hoods sewn from silk, stitched with gold thread, even studded with gems. One lady's gerfalcon wears a crimson hood shaped like a bishop's mitre, looking holier than the abbey priest. Another nobleman parades a kestrel whose jesses are dyed bright blue, matching his cloak. It's less about hunting here and more about flaunting wealth. Your master nudges you. Remember, he mutters, this isn't just sport. It's politics. That's the heart of it. Falconry isn't about catching rabbits, it's about catching status. A historical fact, in medieval England, there was even a book of St. Albans that spelled out who could fly what bird. Kings claimed eagles and gerfalcons, dukes had peregrines, priests sparrowhawks. If you, a lowly apprentice, strutted around with a goshawk, you'd risk a beating, or worse, a fine that would empty your purse for life. But the quirks of noble life are everywhere. Some lords treat their hawks like pampered children, feeding them scraps from banquet tables. One lady insists her bird prefers the sound of harp music during mealtimes. You overhear a courtier bragging that his hawk once dined on swan meat, as though the bird has a palate worth impressing. You try not to roll your eyes, but your master notices and elbows you sharply. Keep your face still. Nobles don't like mockery unless they're the ones making it. Historians still argue whether these displays were genuine passion for falconry or just another excuse for nobles to one-up each other. Probably both. You stand in the middle, clutching your master's pouch of meat, realizing that this art you're sweating over is, in the eyes of the powerful, part sport, part theatre, and part chessboard. The air hums with excitement when the Lord himself steps forward. He wears velvet the color of midnight, and on his arm rests a peregrine as sleek as polished steel. The bird shifts, wings quivering, eager. When the hood is removed, you see eyes that pierce like daggers. The crowd hushes. With a single gesture, the Lord casts her into the air. She arcs high, wings slicing the blue, and for a breathless moment, the world feels still. Then she stoops, folding into a spear of feathers, and crashes down upon a lure, a bundle of feathers swung on a cord. The gasp from the crowd is audible. The Lord beams, raising his arm as though he alone deserves the credit. You know, of course, that his falconer has spent months, maybe years, honing that bird to perfection. But credit flows upward in this world, never sideways. You find yourself sneaking glances at the noble guests. Their admiration isn't just for the bird, it's for the symbolism. A falcon is power, swift, deadly, precise. To control one is to control nature itself. And in the cutthroat games of medieval courts, appearances are everything. Your master makes you hold a bird for the first time in front of others. Your hands shake, but you steady yourself, focusing on the weight on your glove. The noble audience barely notices you, they're too busy clapping for the falcons swooping overhead, but your heart drums louder than the applause. The hawk shifts, then settles, and for once, you feel like part of the spectacle. Later, when the courtyard empties and the nobles return to their wine, you linger by the perches. You stroke the smooth leather of a hood, still warm from its bird. You think of the jewels, the silks, the way everyone gasped at the stoop of the peregrine. And then you think of the mews, the smell of droppings, the endless scraps of liver. Without all that grit, there'd be no glitter. You chuckle to yourself. It's like baking bread, everyone admires the crust, but nobody praises the poor apprentice who scrubbed the oven clean. Still, you can't help feeling a little proud. You were there. You were part of the show, even if hidden in the shadows. And one day, perhaps, it will be your hawk that steals the gasp from the crowd. The day finally comes when you leave the safety of the mews and step into the fields of the chase. The manor buzzes with preparation. Grooms saddle horses, servants carry nets and lures, dogs bark restlessly at their leashes. For weeks, you've watched others handle the hawks, but now your master thrusts a glove into your hand and points you toward the hunting party. The air outside is crisp, smelling of frost and horse sweat. You mount awkwardly, the padded glove heavier now with the added weight of a hawk. She perches uneasily, shifting her talons, and every movement sends a jolt through your arm. The horse beneath you stomps, dogs bay, and nobles chatter as though the whole procession were heading to a festival. In truth, it is. Falconry hunts are as much performance as they are pursuit of prey. You ride out, the company forming a lively column across the fields. Flags flutter, laughter carries on the wind, and the hawks twitch with anticipation beneath their tiny hoods. You glance at yours, a peregrine, her feathers shimmering grey-blue in the sunlight. Hooded, she seems calm, though you know beneath the leather she's burning with energy. When the fields open wide, the hunt begins. Lures are swung, horses slow, and the hawks are unhooded. The change is immediate. Your peregrine stiffens, eyes wide, wings half spread. She's awake in a way no human could ever be, alert, electric, every muscle coiled for flight. Then comes the moment, your master signals, and you cast her into the sky. The motion is practiced, arm sweeping upward, glove opening just enough for her to launch. She bursts free with a beat of wings so strong you nearly topple from the saddle. For a breathless second, she hovers, then climbs higher, circling with effortless grace. The quarry, a hare flushed by the dogs, bolts across the field. The hawk sees it instantly. She stoops, folding herself into a dart of feathers. You gasp, forgetting to breathe, as she slams into her prey with a force that seems impossible for her size. Dust flies, dogs bark madly, and nobles shout with glee. A fact to ground you, falcons can strike at speeds over 200 miles per hour. Even medieval falconers, without radar guns or physics textbooks, marveled at the stoop's ferocity. Chroniclers compared it to lightning, to falling stars, to the wrath of God himself. Watching it live, you understand why. But quirks exist even in the hunt. Some nobles demanded their hawks take quarry mid-air, not on the ground, because apparently rabbit stew tastes better if the rabbit died dramatically. Others arranged hunts purely for display, releasing caged herons just so their hawks could show off. You imagine explaining that to a modern dinner guest. Yes, this soup is from a heron we theatrically launched earlier today. Historians still argue whether falconry was more about food or prestige. Certainly, rabbits and partridge added to the Lord's table, but the pageantry, the banners, the jeweled hoods, the servants trailing with nets, suggests the meat was secondary. You, sweating on your saddle, know this much: the thrill is real. The hawk pins the hare, feathers flared in triumph. You dismount clumsily, heart pounding, and rush to your bird. The kill is hers, but your job is to keep her safe. You kneel, murmuring softly, and offer a strip of meat from your pouch, coaxing her to release the prey. She does, grudgingly, and takes your morsel instead. The dogs leap at the hare, nobles applaud, and you breathe again. It isn't always so smooth. Later in the day, another hawk refuses to return. She soars higher, ignoring the lure, until she vanishes against the pale sky. The falconer curses under his breath, swinging his lure in futility. The nobles laugh it off, though the falconer's face is pale. Losing a hawk is like losing a knight's sword, expensive, shameful, and very, very public. Still, you can't stop grinning as you ride back. Your arm aches, your boots are caked in mud, but you've cast a hawk into the open air and seen her do what she was born to do. It's messy, chaotic, dangerous, and utterly magnificent. That night, in the mews, you stroke her feathers as she preens, smug from her day's work. You whisper nonsense again, half lullaby, half gratitude, and she half blinks at you, calm. For once, you don't mind smelling of liver. For once, The sleepless nights feel worth it. You joke to yourself, drowsy with exhaustion, forget jousts and tournaments. If anyone wants real medieval thrill rides, they should try holding a hawk that might fly off or claw your face at any moment. And in the quiet that follows, you know, the field has claimed you. You're not just an apprentice anymore. You're a falconer in the making. You start noticing something strange in the weeks that follow. The hawks are not interchangeable weapons. They aren't tools you sharpen and set loose. Each bird has a personality as vivid as any knight or servant in the manor. Some are divas, some are bullies, some sulk like teenagers denied their favorite lute song. And once you see it, you can't unsee it. Take your peregrine. She's proud, always upright, wings neat, eyes flashing with sharp impatience. When you're late with food, she clicks her beak in irritation, as if to say, really? I flew a hair out of the sky for you, and you can't even slice liver on time? You start feeding her first, not out of protocol, but because you value your fingers. Then there's your master's goshawk, a brooding brute with a temper that makes knights look tame. He glares at everyone, hunches low on the glove, and launches at prey with reckless fury. Once, he lunged at a passing dog, nearly tangling himself in the leash. Your master swore loudly, and you realized, even seasoned falconers are sometimes just improvising while their birds throw tantrums. And the kestrel, smaller and daintier, flits like a nervous child. She bobs her head constantly, never still, as though the world might collapse if she blinked too long. But when she dives, she's poetry. You admire her most, though she'd probably prefer you admire her from a distance. A mainstream historical fact slips in here. Falconers in the Middle Ages actually categorized birds not just by species but by temperament. Manuals from the 13th and 14th centuries describe hawks as bold, timid, gentle, or froward, which is medieval for stubborn troublemaker. The falconer's skill wasn't just training techniques, it was reading moods and adjusting accordingly. And here's your quirky tidbit. Some falconers believed you could diagnose a hawk's temperament by looking at its nostrils. Wide nostrils meant courage, narrow ones meant cowardice. You imagine medieval job interviews, excellent grip, fine wingspan, but oh dear, the nostrils are all wrong. Yet, historians still argue whether these so-called hawk horoscopes had any merit or were just excuses falconers invented when their birds misbehaved. After all, it's easier to blame bad nostrils than admit you messed up the training. You start picking favorites, though you know you shouldn't. The peregrine feels like a partner, sharp and reliable, while the goshawk unsettles you with his surly mood. One day, he rakes your glove so hard you nearly drop him. Your master laughs, saying, that's his way of showing love. You're not convinced. The individuality becomes clearer in the field. Some hawks wait for the perfect stoop, others barrel straight into prey without thought. Some return immediately to the glove, others circle like they're testing your patience. You learn to predict them not by species, but by personality. Even their bad days feel human. The peregrine sometimes refuses to fly, sulking on her perch. The kestrel once dropped her quarry mid-chase, circling back as if embarrassed. You can almost hear her muttering, that didn't happen. Forget you saw that. At night, in the mews, you listen to the different rhythms. Some birds settle quickly, feathers puffing as they sleep. Others shift and mutter for hours, restless. The air is alive with quirks, and you realize your training is less about commanding and more about negotiating. You find yourself comparing them to the manor folk. The peregrine reminds you of the lord's daughter, elegant, imperious, quick to glare when displeased. The goshawk is like the grumpy steward who always thinks you're slacking. And the kestrel? She's the page boy who never stops fidgeting but somehow gets things done. One evening, as you feed them, you laugh quietly at the thought. A falconer's mews is really just another court full of tempers, rivalries, and politics, only with sharper talons. And so, your bond deepens. Not with hawks in general, but with this peregrine, that goshawk, this kestrel. Individuals, not symbols. You stop thinking of them as birds and start thinking of them as colleagues. Dangerous, moody colleagues who could slice your hand open, but colleagues all the same. It makes you wonder if falconry is less about mastery and more about relationship. You don't bend them entirely to your will. You learn their quirks, adjust your rhythms, compromise where you must. The hawk isn't tamed, it's persuaded, day by day, morsel by morsel, glance by glance. You grin as you drift to sleep that night, smelling as always of liver. Who knew my co-workers would have feathers? You mumble, and the kestrel bobs her head as though in agreement. You spend more and more hours in the mews not with birds, but with the things that keep them in line. The smell of rawhide, beeswax, and sweat begins to cling to you as much as the faint whiff of liver. You start to realize that being a falconer isn't just about tossing hawks skyward, it's also about tending an entire arsenal of tools, each one carrying its own little rituals and risks. The hood, for instance. At first glance it looks like a fancy leather cap, the kind of thing a drunk tanner might make after too many ales. But slip it onto a hawk's head, and the bird suddenly calms, darkness folding around it like sleep. Your master teaches you to handle it gently, never fumbling, because a hawk that mistrusts the hood mistrusts you. You try stitching one yourself, the leather stiff and stubborn. Your seam is crooked, and your master laughs, saying it looks like a medieval party hat. You keep it anyway, your practice hood, as a reminder that falconry is as much craftsmanship as it is partnership. Then there are the jesses, the thin leather straps tied to the bird's legs. They're deceptively simple. A millimeter too wide, and they chafe. Too thin, and they snap. The first time you cut a set, your knife slips, leaving an ugly notch. Your master inspects it, shrugs, and mutters, "Better notch in leather than notch in flesh." You learn quickly that falconry equipment doubles as life insurance. Lures become your next challenge, padded leather swings weighted with scraps of meat, painted or feathered to look like prey. You spend hours braiding the cord, then practicing the spin, trying not to smack yourself in the head. Your master insists, the lure is an extension of your arm. You secretly think it's more like medieval yo-yo tricks, except the stakes involve talons instead of schoolyard jeers. Perches also need constant care. You scrub them with sand, replace worn coverings, and check for splinters. A bad perch can wound a bird's feet, and nothing ruins a falcon's mood faster than sore talons. You joke to yourself that it's like being the world's grumpiest podiatrist. A mainstream historical fact slips neatly in here. Many surviving falconry manuals, like Frederick Tuster Art Venandi cum Avibus, The Art of Hunting with Birds, devote as much detail to equipment maintenance as they do to training methods. The emperor himself apparently whittled perches and fussed over jesses, proving even monarchs weren't above leatherwork. Then comes your quirky tidbit. Medieval falconers sometimes decorated their tools, even scenting leather with herbs. Not just for beauty, but because they believed lavender or mint could calm the birds. Imagine the noble lords, flexing their jeweled gloves while their hawks perched on lavender-scented leashes. That's basically medieval aromatherapy for raptors. Still, historians argue whether those scented straps actually worked, or if falconers were just indulging in personal superstition, or worse, trying to impress patrons with fancy-smelling hawks. The more you work, the more you notice how each tool becomes part of the rhythm. Before dawn, check the jesses, weigh the hawk, test the lure. Midday, oil the hoods, rewrap the perches. Evening, scrape droppings, lay out drying leather strips for tomorrow. It's endless, repetitive, sometimes mind-numbingly dull. And yet, if you neglect even one small step, disaster strikes. A frayed leash means a lost hawk. A rough perch means infection. You even learn to repair things on the road. Once, on a hunting trip, the goshawk's jest snaps clean in two. With no spare at hand, you improvise with a strip of your own belt. It works, but you have to walk home holding up your trousers with one hand while cradling an irritable hawk with the other. The nights roar with laughter, calling you half-dressed falconer. You mutter that at least the bird stayed put. Through all this, your hands toughen, scarred with nicks from knives and scratches from talons. Your nails are always dirty, your fingertips always stiff from leatherwork. But you start to feel pride in the small details. A neatly cut hood seam, a perfectly balanced lure, a perch that gleams smooth as bone. It's not glamorous, but it's mastery of another kind. Sometimes, you catch yourself comparing your toolkit to a knight's armory. Where they polish swords and polish armor, you oil hoods and sharpen knives for cutting meat. The difference is that knights fight enemies, while you bargain daily with allies that could blind you in a blink. The hawks, of course, don't care about your long hours of leather cutting and stitching. To them, the hood is either comfort or irritation, the leash either secure or not. But you care. Because every crease in leather, every knot in cord, every scrape on wood is a line between harmony and chaos. And so, falconry becomes more than flying birds. It becomes craft, maintenance, endless tinkering. Half bird keeper, half leatherworker, half carpenter. Which, yes, makes you 1.5 people by medieval math. But that's falconry, a trade stitched from dozens of skills, each one just as important as the bird itself. By the end of the season, your practice hood still sits crooked in your kit, but beside it gleams a new one you've stitched straight, seams tight, leather polished. You can't resist a smile. Progress, however small, still counts. And in falconry, small details are the only thing keeping your fingers attached. You rise in the chill of dawn, rubbing sleep from your eyes, and your first duty isn't to grab breakfast or stretch your back, it's to check on the hawks. The mews is alive with faint rustling and soft clinks of jesses against perch rings. Each bird waits, feathers puffed slightly against the cold. Before you even think about meat or training, you must weigh them. It sounds tedious, but in falconry, a few grams make the difference between obedience and rebellion. A hawk that's too heavy, well-fed and smug, might fly to the trees and never come back. Too light, and you risk weakness, illness, or, if you've truly messed up, death. So you cradle each bird carefully, balancing them on the scale, watching the needle twitch. Your master insists you record every number, scratching figures into a wax tablet. You can't help but mutter, "I thought this was falconry, not accounting." He glares. You continue writing. Once the weighing is done, the feeding begins. Tiny morsels of meat, liver, pigeon breast, sometimes rabbit, are offered in exacting amounts. Each bird is an individual. The peregrine prefers fresh pigeon, the goshawk happily gulps down rabbit, and the kestrel fusses until you slice the pieces just right. You imagine them as medieval aristocrats at a banquet. "No, good sir, I ordered partridge, not dove." Here's the mainstream historical fact. Falconers in medieval Europe often carried portable scales to ensure precise feeding. This wasn't obsession, it was survival. Manuals stress the flying weight, the point at which the hawk is keen enough to hunt but not so hungry that it collapses. Your master explains it with grim simplicity. A fat hawk is a free hawk. A starving hawk is a dead hawk. Aim for the knife's edge. And then the quirky tidbit. In some noble households, falcons ate better than servants. Chronicles describe kitchens where cooks prepared delicate slivers of meat for birds while stable boys gnawed on stale bread. You, of course, get the leftovers, usually gristle and bone fragments. The birds live like kings, you live like their scullion. Historians still argue whether medieval falconers were allowed to sneak bits of meat for themselves, or if strict lords counted every scrap. You decide not to test it, you've already been caught chewing rabbit once, and the scolding was worse than hunger. After feeding, it's time for weathering. You carry the birds outside, securing each to a perch in the yard. The morning sun glints on feathers, the air sharp with dew. Here the hawks stretch, preen, and observe the world. You stand watch like a guard, because even tethered, they are never entirely safe. A stray dog, a greedy crow, or even a bold thief could spell disaster. Sometimes, as you lean against the fence yawning, you notice how villagers pause to gawk. To them, falcons are creatures of myth, symbols of nobles and kings. They whisper about you, half in awe, half in envy, because you, an ordinary fellow, hold the leash of a bird that could snatch a rabbit from under their noses. You try not to look smug. The routine repeats day after day. Weigh, feed, weather, clean. Scrub perches with sand. Replace water bowls. Check jesses for wear. By the third week, you realize you can do it in your sleep. And sometimes, you nearly do. There are moments of humor amid the monotony. One morning, you forget to secure a kestrel's leash properly. The bird hops, flaps, and suddenly launches straight into the manure pit. You scramble after it, gagging, while your master shakes his head. "Congratulations," he says dryly, "you've invented the world's worst perfume." Another day, you're late with food, and the goshawk glares so intensely that you swear it's plotting your murder. You apologize aloud, promising double portions, like some desperate medieval butler. Over time, though, the hawks begin to respond to your rhythm. They hop to the glove more readily, shift less under the hood, calm faster after weathering. You sense a quiet trust forming, not affection, not the loyalty of dogs, but an acknowledgement. You are the one who provides balance, who measures and feeds and keeps them sharp. And yet, you never stop feeling the razor's edge. One slip of the scale, one overly generous feeding, and a hawk might decide you are no longer necessary. They don't love you. They stay only because hunger persuades them to. That knowledge keeps you humble, attentive, precise. By evening, after cleaning up scraps and droppings, you collapse on your straw bed, your hands reeking of raw liver, your tunic stained with feathers. You mutter to yourself, "Falconry, less flying, more feeding." Then you fall asleep, only to wake before dawn and do it all again. Because that's the truth of falconry. Beneath the glamour of hunts and noble spectacles lies endless routine, repetition, patience, a life measured in grams of meat and scratches on a wax tablet. And you, tired though you are, begin to take pride in that routine. Because each day you keep the balance, you keep the hawks with you. And each day they stay, you inch closer to mastery. You rise with the dawn once more, but today your hands feel oddly restless. The feeding and weighing are behind you, the hawks weathered in the yard, and your master fixes you with that steady stare that says, "Today, you'll stop being a servant and start being a trainer." You swallow hard. It's one thing to carry meat bowls and scrub perches, it's another to guide a predator's instincts without losing a finger. The first step is simple on paper, the lure. A bundle of leather and feathers, weighted just right, dangled on a cord. To the hawk, it looks like prey. To you, it's the bridge between hunger and obedience. Your master demonstrates with slow precision. He swings the lure wide, then closer, then lets it skim the grass. The peregrine locks on instantly, wings slicing the air, and in a sudden blur of talons, it seizes the bundle. He rewards it with meat, calm and steady, as though the dance were inevitable. Then he turns to you. "Now," he says, "don't drop it." Your hands sweat. The leather cord feels alive, tugging with every swing. The hawk's hood comes off, and suddenly you feel the weight of centuries of training pressing on your shoulders. Aristocrats might boast about falcons, but you're the one standing here with a sharp-beaked missile aimed directly at you. You whirl the lure clumsily. It bounces awkwardly. The hawk hesitates, offended by your lack of grace. For a tense moment, it seems it will just fly off to find its own dinner. You mutter under your breath, "Please don't embarrass me in front of the boss." On the third swing, the bird launches, wings thunderous. It strikes, talons piercing leather, and you nearly topple over. But you hold. You manage to steady your breath as your master nods once. "Not entirely hopeless," he says. Praise, in his language. Here's the mainstream historical fact. Falconry training followed a carefully staged process called manning, involving gradual exposure to the falconer's voice, glove, and movement before advancing to lures and live prey. Manuals from the 13th century outline this in exhausting detail, like a medieval step-by-step guidebook. You're grateful for the tradition, though it doesn't stop your heart from racing every time feathers blur in your face. And the quirky tidbit: some falconers supposedly talk to their birds constantly, reciting prayers, gossip, or even poetry, so that the hawk became accustomed to the human voice. Imagine you, muttering about the price of bread or complaining about your boots, and a hawk staring at you like, "Really? That's your story?" You try it once, rambling about how your shoes always leak, and swear the kestrel looks insulted. Historians still argue whether medieval falconers ever used music in training. Some suggest flutes or bells calmed the birds, others say it would only annoy them. You wonder if a lute strummed badly enough might actually drive a falcon to obedience just to shut you up. Over the weeks, the rhythm of training sharpens you. You learn how to pace the lure, to let the hawk win sometimes, to always reward with a measured piece of meat. Too stingy, and the bird resents you. Too generous, and it loses interest. Again, the knife's edge. Always balance. You also learn fear, and how to master it. The goshawk, quick-tempered and brutal, once misses the lure and collides with your arm. The bruise blooms black and purple, and your master chuckles, "Now you'll remember to keep your wrist high." Another time, the peregrine refuses to release the lure, mantling over it with wings spread. You kneel, patient, whispering nonsense until it finally loosens its grip. Your master's advice rings in your head: never fight the bird. Outstubborn it. You never knew patience could feel like battle. Yet there are moments of pure wonder. The first time you unhood the peregrine in an open field and it wheels upward, circling higher and higher until it's a mere dot in the sky, you nearly forget to breathe. The lure flashes below, and in an instant, the dot plummets. A streak of feathers, a rush of wind past your ears, and the lure is struck so hard you stagger. You can't help but laugh, half in delight, half in disbelief, that you've coaxed a predator into partnership. Training also reveals personalities. The kestrel, tiny but fierce, dives eagerly but tires quickly. The goshawk, moody as a storm, tests your patience daily, glaring as if you've insulted its ancestors. The peregrine, proud and aloof, seems to tolerate you only because you provide flying practice. You start giving them nicknames in your head: Grump, Diva, and Royal Pain. You never say them aloud, you value your ears too much. The villagers, watching from afar, are less cautious. They call you Hawk Whisperer or Bird Boy, sometimes with admiration, sometimes with a smirk. Children chase the swinging lure, giggling until your master chases them off. One old woman swears you're practicing witchcraft, muttering charms into feathers. You're tempted to tell her the only spell you know is "Don't fly away, please." Evenings are filled with exhaustion, your arms aching from endless swinging, your throat hoarse from coaxing. Yet you lie awake, replaying each dive in your head, the arcs of wings, the strike of talons. Slowly, you realize you're no longer just surviving tasks, you're shaping skill. And one night, as you drift towards sleep, you murmur to yourself, "I'm training them." Then, with a sly grin in the dark, "Or maybe they're training me." Either way, you know the journey has only just begun. The day of your first hunt arrives, and you wake with your stomach tying itself into knots. Training on lures is one thing. Real prey, with feathers and blood and the unpredictability of life, is another. Your master barely glances at you, already adjusting the leather straps on the peregrine's jesses. He says only, "Keep steady." The bird does the work. Which is comforting advice in the way that "don't drown" is comforting to someone tossed into a river. You march out with the hunting party. Nobles, dressed in fine wool and fur, chatter excitedly, hawks perched on gloved fists, their jeweled hoods gleaming. You, by contrast, smell faintly of ferret, because the beaters brought along a pair to flush rabbits from burrows. It's a noble spectacle in theory, but in practice it's a noisy parade of people, dogs, and creatures who would all rather be somewhere else. The falcon on your glove shifts, restless, and you can feel the wiry strength through the leather. Its eyes, sharp and unblinking, scan the fields ahead. You whisper softly, half for its benefit, half for your own nerves. "We've got this. Don't embarrass me now." The hawk blinks, clearly unmoved by your pep talk. The dogs flush a hair, and the field explodes with motion. Someone cries out, "Cast." You unhood your peregrine with trembling fingers, release, and suddenly your arm feels shockingly light. The bird launches, wings cleaving the air, and in seconds it's soaring. The hare zigzags wildly, but the peregrine climbs high, then stoops in a blur. A flash, a thump, and the hare tumbles. Cheers rise from the nobles. Your master only raises an eyebrow as if to say, "Try not to look so surprised." Here's the mainstream historical fact. Falconry hunts often targeted hares, rabbits, or small birds like partridges. The spectacle was as important as the catch. Lords and ladies admired the aerial display as much as the dinner it provided. In truth, hunting with hawks was sometimes wildly inefficient compared to simple nets or bows, but efficiency wasn't the point. It was theater. For the quirky tidbit, ferrets were indeed used to flush rabbits, sometimes fitted with tiny bells so the falconers could hear them underground. Picture that, a long, wriggling ferret with a jingling necklace, like the strangest medieval pet accessory. You watch one such ferret disappear into a burrow, bells tinkling faintly, and can't help but chuckle. The nobles pretend not to notice, but you suspect they're trying not to laugh too. Historians still argue whether hawks in medieval hunts were treated more like working animals or status symbols. Were they partners in the chase, or feathered jewelry to show off at feasts? You, sweating in the mud with a ferret running circles around your boots, are pretty sure the answer is both. The hunt continues. Sometimes the hawks miss, the hare dives into cover, or a partridge folds its wings and vanishes into brush. When that happens, you have to coax your bird back, swinging the lure desperately, heart pounding until it circles back toward you. Once, it ignores you completely, choosing instead to perch smugly on a distant tree. You mutter under your breath about betrayal while everyone else laughs. The bird eventually returns, only because it decides to, not because of your skill. A lesson in humility delivered with feathers. But when it works, it is breathtaking. A goshawk tears through woodland, chasing a pheasant with furious speed, weaving between branches with impossible agility. A kestrel hovers delicately, then drops onto a mouse almost too small to notice. Every strike is a reminder that you're tapping into something older and wilder than castles or kings. The nobles clap each other on the shoulders, boast about whose hawk flew best, and talk of feasts to come. You, meanwhile, try not to look too proud as you cradle your peregrine back onto your glove. It mantles over the hare briefly, claiming its prize, before you trade meat for the kill and tuck it gently under its hood once more. Evening falls, and the party returns triumphant. The hare goes to the cooks, who will no doubt dress it with herbs and serve it alongside other game. You'll probably just get stew scraps, but that's fine, you're buzzing too much to care. Later, back at the mews, you clean equipment, oil the hood leather, and check the jesses for wear. Your master says little, but as he passes he pauses just long enough to murmur, "Not bad." You nearly faint from the weight of the compliment. As you finally slump onto your pallet, your muscles aching and your clothes smelling faintly of hawk and hare, you think, you've made it. You're no longer just watching others hunt. You're part of the strange, chaotic dance of nobility, ferrets, feathers, and fate. And in your exhausted haze, you manage one final sleepy joke to yourself. At least the hare didn't outrun me. Small victories. You wake to a sound you've come to know all too well, the scrape of talons on wood. One of the hawks is restless again, shifting on its perch, feathers fluffed, glaring at the world like it has a personal vendetta against existence. You sigh, roll off your straw pallet, and shuffle toward it, half asleep. Welcome to falconry maintenance, where the line between science, superstition, and sheer luck is about as thin as a hawk's feather. You check the bird's feet. A small sore has appeared, angry red at the base of one talon. This is no joke, foot injuries could end a hawk's hunting life, and a falconer's reputation with it. Your master insists on keeping the perches clean and the jesses supple, but even so, sores happen. You dab gently at it with a rag dipped in a mash of herbs, sage, rosemary, and whatever else the village healer swears by this week. Will it work? Honestly, you don't know. But you mutter a charm anyway, because what harm can it do? Here's your mainstream historical fact for the day. Medieval falconers often blended herbal remedies with careful hygiene. They might wash sore feet in vinegar or wine, apply ointments of honey or grease, or dust wounds with powdered herbs. For all the superstition swirling around, they did know that cleanliness and attention could make the difference between a flying hawk and a useless one. But then come the quirkier cures. One fellow insists that tying a hawk's feather around your wrist wards off fevers. Another swears by burning dried owl droppings to keep evil spirits away from the mews. And yes, someone once told you that placing a falcon on a sickbed could drive away demons from a patient's body. You've yet to see anyone attempt it, though you admit the image of a nobleman in bed, feverish, with a very confused hawk tethered beside him, is worth a chuckle. Historians still argue whether medieval falconry leaned more toward practical animal husbandry or mystical ritual. Some accounts describe meticulous record-keeping, weights, diets, conditions, while others read more like magical grimoires than training manuals. You, standing here with herb paste on your hands, straddling the line between doctor and magician, feel that the truth is probably tangled somewhere in the middle. Your master encourages you to learn both. If the bird heals, he says, does it matter whether it was sage or a charm that did it? You suppose not, though you can't help noticing he mutters prayers under his breath while treating hawks, just in case. Later in the day, you notice a kestrel seems listless, wings drooping. You prepare a tonic, chopped liver mixed with garlic and a little wine. You wrinkle your nose, yes, garlic wine is just as unappealing as it sounds, but the bird gulps it down with gusto. By evening, it seems perkier. You allow yourself a moment of pride, until your master mutters, or maybe it just wanted attention. Thanks for the encouragement. Superstition also threads through your own routines. You find yourself avoiding stepping on certain cracks in the mews floor, whistling a little tune before uncovering a hawk, or patting your pouch twice before a hunt. Are these rituals or just nervous habits? Hard to say. But the hawks seem calmer when you do them, and that's all that matters. One particularly stormy night, the birds grow restless. Lightning flashes, thunder booms, and the mews fills with shrieks and flapping. You spend hours calming them, whispering nonsense, offering scraps, until at last the storm passes. In the morning, a villager shakes his head and tells you, you should have hung a hawk's feather over the door. Storm spirits hate that. You smile politely and make a mental note never to repeat that advice aloud. Still, the role of healer is part of your life now. You spend as much time mixing poultices as you do training, patching minor wounds, treating parasites, and trimming beaks and talons. You feel, at times, like barber, apothecary, and priest rolled into one. Your master reminds you that every falconer worth his salt must know how to keep a hawk alive. Hunts are spectacular, but health is survival. And in your quieter moments, you notice how this work changes you. Where once you saw a blur of feathers, now you spot subtle signs: a restless wing, a tilt of the head, a flicker of dullness in the eye. You're learning to read the language of hawks, to catch illness before it spreads, to anticipate what cannot be spoken. By night, exhausted, you flop into your straw bed. The mews smells of herbs and feathers, sharp and earthy. You dream of mixing potions, of hawks whispering secrets, of charms scrawled on parchment. In the morning, you'll wake and do it again, part doctor, part wizard, wholly devoted to keeping these fierce creatures alive. And if, along the way, you've become the kind of person who casually explains to strangers that falcons can cure demons if tethered to a bedpost, well, let's just call that occupational hazard. You stumble awake before dawn, not because you want to, but because one of the hawks has decided the entire village should know it's hungry. You cover your head with a blanket, but your master's voice cuts through. Up. Market day. And so you drag yourself out, legs protesting, to join the shuffle of carts and beasts heading into town. The medieval marketplace is a cacophony: bells ringing, pigs squealing, someone hawking, pun intended, fresh eels for breakfast. You can't help but smirk at the thought that people in the future will find that idea revolting, while here, hot eel pie is practically comfort food. You tug your hood tighter against the smell. Your purpose is not food, though. You're here to buy supplies for the hawks. Meat, leather, and the occasional secret ingredient. Meat first, you haggle with a butcher for rabbit carcasses, some already skinned, others still sporting tufts of fur. Falconers feed their birds lean meat, often rabbit or pigeon, avoiding anything too fatty. A merchant tries to sell you pork scraps instead. You politely decline, remembering your master's warning that pigs make hawks sluggish. Besides, you've seen what pork does to your own stomach. You don't wish that fate on a falcon. Here's your mainstream historical fact. Falconry required a surprising network of trade. Falconers bought meat from butchers, jesses from leatherworkers, hoods from specialized artisans, even exotic spices and ointments from apothecaries. This wasn't a solitary hobby, it was an economy. Next stop, the leather stall. You run your fingers along strips of tanned hide, checking for flexibility. Too stiff, and the jesses will cut into a bird's legs. Too soft, and they'll fray quickly. You select a few, bargaining down the price with a muttered promise to recommend the craftsman to the local knights. Will you actually do that? Probably not. But it works. Then come the apothecaries, and here the marketplace becomes stranger. Rows of jars filled with powders and pastes, dried frogs strung like garlands, even a jar of pickled lizard eyes, allegedly useful for eyesight, though you suspect it's mostly for dramatic effect. You buy sage, rosemary, and a little honey, because nothing soothes a wound like sweetness. The quirky tidbit of the day. One apothecary swears he has falcon's tears, preserved in a vial. He insists they're good luck for hunters, though you're fairly sure they're just water with a pinch of salt. You don't buy them, but you do wonder what sort of person first decided to market fake bird tears. Truly, history's first snake oil salesman. Historians still argue whether markets like these were primarily practical hubs or social theaters. Some accounts suggest people came just to gossip, to see and be seen, to hear news from distant towns. You believe both. The hawk meat might keep your birds alive, but the gossip keeps you sane. And oh, the gossip. You overhear a noblewoman whispering about a knight who lost his falcon mid-hunt and had to dive into a river to retrieve it, armor and all. Another group trades rumors about a rival lord importing gerfalcons from the icy north, birds said to be the fiercest hunters alive. Whether true or not, it sparks your imagination, massive white hawks swooping like winter itself. You shiver. After your errands, you wander past stalls selling trinkets. A glass bead catches your eye, bright green, shimmering in the morning light. You can't afford it, but you pause anyway. Markets tempt you not only with necessities but with dreams, baubles you'll never buy but secretly covet. That's the charm of them. On your way home, you balance your load of meat, leather, and herbs, nearly tripping over a dog chasing a chicken. The owner yells, feathers fly, and you mutter under your breath that some days the market feels more like a battlefield than a bazaar. Back in the mews, you unpack the goods. The hawks eye the meat eagerly, wings twitching. Your master inspects the leather, grunts his approval, and says only, "Not bad. Next time, don't pay more than 3 pennies for sage." You bite back a retort, after all, you're lucky he let you handle the buying at all. By evening, the smell of fresh herbs lingers on your hands, mingling with the musk of hawk feathers. You flop onto your straw bed, exhausted, mind buzzing with images, jars of lizard eyes, nobles gossiping about falcons, the glint of green glass beads. The market is chaos, but it's also lifeblood. Without it, falconry would be impossible. And so, tired but oddly satisfied, you drift toward sleep, knowing you'll be back there soon enough, haggling with butchers and avoiding eel pie. The years begin to gather like feathers at the bottom of the mews, light at first, then slowly piling, until you notice that everything is dusted in them. Your master, once sharp-eyed and stern, now moves a little slower, his hands trembling when he knots the jesses. You watch him fumble, and though you offer to help, he waves you off with that same stubborn pride that has defined him for decades. Still, you can see it. The man is fading, just as some of the birds he's raised are fading too. You notice it first in the hawks. Their wings are still strong, but the gleam in their eyes dulls ever so slightly. One refuses to fly as high as she once did, another grows grumpy at feeding time, preferring to sit on her perch with ruffled feathers like an old lady muttering about noisy neighbors. Hawks don't grow old gracefully, much like people. They grow unpredictable. Yet you love them for it. Here's a mainstream historical fact to settle your mind. Medieval falconers often considered their birds lifelong companions, not disposable tools. Nobles might exchange hawks as gifts or political favors, but working falconers formed bonds that stretched beyond usefulness. There are records of men refusing to sell aged hawks, keeping them even when they could no longer hunt, as if they were family dogs. And then comes the quirky tidbit. Some believed a hawk's feathers, when burned, produced smoke that could cure headaches. You have no idea who thought sniffing bird feather smoke was a bright idea, but you're not about to test it. Your master once muttered something about a squire passing out after trying the remedy. You decide that sticking to rosemary tea is the wiser option. Historians still argue whether falconry was primarily a sport of aristocracy or a practice of deep partnership between human and bird. Was it about spectacle, or about a strange friendship? You lean toward the second. The hawks in your care are no longer mere performers for nobles, they're part of your daily rhythm, woven into your heartbeat. You remember the first time you watched your master release a bird, decades ago now. He had whispered softly before letting go, as though the bird understood the words. At the time, you thought it was theatrics. But now, when you speak to your own hawks, your words feel less like performance and more like prayer. One evening, you sit with your oldest bird, a goshawk whose feathers are flecked with white. She grips your glove lightly, no longer crushing with the same strength. You stroke her chest, murmuring nonsense, and you're suddenly struck by how brief their flight spans are compared to your own. 10, maybe 15 years at most. Yet in those years, they burn brighter than many people you know. Your master coughs from across the mews, pulling a cloak tighter around his shoulders. He pretends it's just a chill, but you know better. There's a quiet between you both now, the kind of quiet that acknowledges time is running out. He doesn't say it, but you can tell he's grateful you're there to carry the work forward. One night, he finally lets you take full charge. A noble has requested a demonstration, and instead of leading, your master sits on a bench, watching. You walk into the courtyard with your hawk perched confidently. The bird launches, swooping through the air with a grace that silences the audience. For the first time, you're not the apprentice, not the servant, you're the falconer. And when the bird returns to your glove, the applause is not just for her flight, but for you too. Later, you share bread and cheese with your master. He's quiet, but his eyes are shining. He doesn't need to say anything. You know. Over the next months, you carry on the routines with a reverence you didn't feel before. Each act, tying a knot, trimming talons, preparing meat, feels like ritual, as though you're preserving not just the hawks, but the memory of the man who taught you. And when he passes, you bury him quietly near the mews. A hawk circles overhead, as if aware of the moment. You can't prove it, but you swear the bird lingers longer than usual, crying out once before vanishing into the horizon. From then on, the mews are yours. You are no longer a boy cleaning droppings, or a nervous apprentice fumbling leather straps. You are the falconer. And with every bird you raise, you feel his presence at your side, his voice in your ear, reminding you that this craft is more than a job, it's a bond that outlives even the longest of lives. The mews are quiet tonight, save for the rustle of feathers and the occasional click of a beak against leather. You stand with your oldest hawk perched on your glove, her weight familiar, comforting, as if she were always meant to be part of your arm. The sun has dipped low, painting the sky in shades of copper and violet. This feels right. You think, an ending wrapped in beauty. You've released countless birds over the years, each flight carrying its own rhythm, some clumsy, some breathtaking, some triumphant. But tonight is different. Tonight, it feels like the final note in a song that has played for decades. You take a deep breath, stroking her breast with your thumb, and for once you don't rush. The world around you seems to hold still, as though even the wind is waiting. It's worth remembering that falconry, for all its spectacle and pageantry, was never just about the hunt. Historians note that it symbolized control, patience, and harmony between man and nature. A king with a falcon at his wrist wasn't just flaunting wealth, he was displaying mastery over the wild. Yet in your heart, you've always known that falcons were never truly mastered. They tolerated you, bonded with you, maybe even trusted you. But they always kept a piece of themselves wild, untouchable, and that was the beauty. There's a quirky story you once heard in a tavern, that a falconer who released his bird at sunset would receive dreams of flying that night. You chuckled at the time, but now, with your hawk shifting on your glove, you wonder if there might be truth in it. After all, stranger things have been believed, like carrying hawk bones for luck in gambling. Historians still argue whether falconry's enduring legacy lies in its practicality or its poetry. Was it truly a hunting tool, or was it a form of art, a dance between two species? You've lived it, and still you can't decide. Maybe it's both. Maybe that's why it lingers in the imagination centuries later. You kneel, loosening the leather straps from her legs with careful fingers. She twitches, eager, sensing what comes next. You whisper a word, nonsense, perhaps, but it steadies you. Then you lift your arm and give her the signal. She launches. For a moment, the air itself seems to bend around her wings. She rises, slicing through the copper dusk, each beat of her wings carrying her higher until she's a dark silhouette against the fading light. You tilt your head back, watching, your eyes following every shift and dive. She doesn't look back, but you don't need her to. The flight is short, but it's enough. She arcs once, twice, then vanishes into the horizon, her shape swallowed by the distance. The silence that follows is heavy, but not sorrowful. It feels like completion. You remain standing long after she's gone, the weight of the empty glove strange yet freeing. Around you, the mews settle into night. The other birds tuck their heads beneath their wings, the world cooling into stillness. You lower your arm and let out a breath you didn't realize you were holding. This is what a life amounts to, not grandeur, not riches, but moments like this. A bond that began with raw meat and leather straps, grown into trust, patience, and memory. A life woven from talons, feathers, and the quiet hum of devotion. And though your hands are scarred, your back bent, and your hair streaked with silver, you feel lighter than you have in years. You close your eyes and let the twilight fold around you. Now the pace slows, the edges of memory softening, like the twilight itself. The air cools gently against your skin, carrying only the faintest smell of leather and hay. You let the stillness wash over you, as though every sound has been hushed for your sake alone. You imagine the hawk still flying, her wings stretched wide, gliding effortlessly above the forests and rivers you once knew so well. She's there, somewhere in the fading sky, carried on invisible currents, but in your heart she has already returned. She's part of you now, part of the story you've lived and shared. Your breathing deepens, slow and steady. The noises of the medieval world, the clang of iron, the chatter of nobles, the laughter of servants, fade away one by one, leaving only the whisper of feathers brushing the air. You picture yourself lying back in a soft field, grass cushioning you, the sky endless above. The hawk wheels once more, smaller and smaller, until she's no longer visible. And in that absence, there's peace. The work is done. The hunt is over. The bond remains. So let yourself sink deeper now, as though you too are carried on a steady current, weightless, drifting. No effort, no struggle, only the simple rhythm of your breath, the softness of the night around you, and the lingering warmth of a life well lived. Sleep comes easily here, in the company of hawks, in the shadow of mews, in the hush of twilight. Rest, and dream of wings.